it this way. Together we play. We are IMA. From the beginning till the end of this day, we move and we sway. Together we stay. We'll take your hand and help you through the mistakes. Whatever it takes, we'll find a brand new place. We'll join our hand in hands and then we'll fly till the end of the time, till our worries will die. We'll do it our way, the I am a way. I am a It's a dream to be at our best. We fight on our own with no room for rest. It's a dream to be at our best. We fight on our own with no room for rest. And it's a legacy that we want to leave. Make them all believe there will be no great leave. And all the world will follow us on our tracks, turning white from the black, just like raising the flag. We'll do it our way, the I am a way.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It has been 50 years since IMA's effort in promoting management in Central India. It has loads of firsts to its name, from Management Day to conventions to Brand Guru Quiz to Conclave. IMA has been able to successfully conduct events which has given tremendous impetus to the region of Central India in management practices. As this celebration are a year-long event, culminating in the conclave next year, IMA will have the privilege to welcome various speakers during the year, from captains of industry to sportsmen, thinkers, achievers, economics, etc. etc. Today we have with us the renowned management guru, Shri Gopalkrishnan, Executive Director Tata Sons, who will be sharing with us his thoughts on leadership challenges, directions and destination. May I request our former chairman of the board of the IMA board, Mr. Ravi Mohan, to welcome our guest the traditional way. Please. May I request Mr. Gopalkrishnan to please take the dais. Thank you. I would call upon our chairman, Mr. Shiv Singh Mehta, for his opening remarks.
I am really thankful to Mr. Gopalkrishnan and Mrs. Geeta Gopalkrishnan for accepting our invitation and coming over to Indore for this evening. Thank you, sir. I warmly welcome you and to you as well. Friends, 50 years is an important milestone, not only for celebrations, but also equally for self-introspection. We have achieved a lot, and that is because of many people who have contributed in making what IMA whatever it is today, and some of them are sitting in this auditorium. At the same time, it is very important that we have to add new members who care for IMA, who feel IMA is theirs. Because if we have to build our future and we have to see that IMA continues to perform, participate and contribute, then we will create renewed energy, new thoughts, and people will take on this message and this effort in future. We want people who will be called pillars of this organization in times to come. And this was the reason why we wanted some of the people who have been invited here to please understand what we are trying to communicate to you, because you are successful entrepreneurs, business managers, you have thoughts, you have inclination, but we want you to come to IMA, come forward and participate in IMA's activities. Rather, I would say you should own up IMA. Friends, this is the single reason why we have invited such people also along with this in this evening, who come to IMA only for some of the functions. But that is not the limitation we want you to have. Please come to create functions, to create some of the events, some of the programs. You have your own organizations which are successfully doing so many such things within your organizations. Please bring them out and bring it IMA platform. Today's subject, leadership challenges, direction and destination, is important for our businesses, but they are equally important for IMA, because these are the challenges which we shall face. So please find and develop a communication channel whereby we can get together, exchange our thoughts, and bring new ways of taking this organization in future, and we all share this responsibility collectively. So I once again welcome all of you, and I would like that we listen to Mr. Gopalakrishnan's views, not only for our business, for IMA as well.
Actually, there has been tremendous faux since I have joined IMA, and I'm trying to live up to the reputation of the tag which just Mr. Gopalkrishnan gave me as Pratibha Patil of IMA. So the AV hasn't come as usual. We don't need an introduction from Mr. Gopalkrishnan, but just to be formally let everybody know who he is, because there are lots of young people over here. So, may I take the opportunity to introduce you. Mr. Gopalkrishnan has been a professional manager for the past 45 years, since 1967 onwards, 31 years with Unilever and 14 years in Tata. He has served in Jeddah as Chairman Unilever, Arabia and Bangalore as Managing Director of Groupon Limited India, and finally as Vice Chairman of Hindustan Lever. Currently, he is Director Tata Sons Limited. He is Chairman of the Tata Auto Component Systems and Rallis India, the Vice Chairman of Tata Chemicals, and is the Director of the Tata Power and Tata Technologies. He is an independent director on the boards of Akzo Nobel India and Castrol India. Gopal, as he's known as to amongst most of his friends, but I would still stick to Sri Gopalakrishnan, studied physics at St. Xavier's College, Calcutta, engineering at IIT Kharagpur, and attended the advanced management program at Harvard Business School. He is a past president of the All India Management Association as well. Mr. Gopalakrishnan has, to his credit, numerous books. The Case of Bonsai Manager, Lessons of Manager on Intuition, When the Penny Drops, Learning What Is Not Taught, What the CEO Really Wants From You, the 4 A's of Managerial Success. He has delivered guest lectures and written articles. He has designed and taught an unusual course entitled LWNT, Learning What's Not Taught, at Tata Management Training Center, Pune, and at Indian B schools. May I present to you Sri Gopalkrishnan.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, and my friends, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to be here, to have been invited to talk at the IMA 50th Golden Jubilee celebration. I'm glad to tell you that I won't be using any slides, so there's no PowerPoint. You can stare at my face and listen to what I'm saying, because I think what I want to share with you is probably not an answer to many questions, but provides the basis for a dialogue of something that is bothering all of us, and none of us knows exactly how to solve it. And that's encapsulated in the title, Leadership Challenge Direction. By the way, I must request the IMA with all humility that this photograph looks as though it's come out of a Tutankhamun exhibition. So if you get a more recent one, it will be a bit helpful. There used to be a gentleman called Raunak Singh, who always, even at the age of 80, had a picture which was when he was 45. And so I've begun a bit like that now. There's this story all of you might have heard, but I will take the risk of repeating it, of a guy who brought a bull with him, came to the bar, to the coffee bar, and every day he would order a cup of coffee, finish his coffee with a resoluteness, he'll pull out his gun and shoot the bull, and then he'll walk away. So this happened on the first day, and people were shocked, and it took hours to clean up what was left of the bull. He came on the second day with another bull, and then they asked him, "What the hell are you up to?" And this is what he says. He said, "I'm training to be a top business leader. In top management, this is what you have to do. I walk in, I drink the coffee, I shoot the bull, leave others to clean the mess, and I walk out." And that is what I'm planning and training to do. So top management has acquired a certain image in the wake of the events that have happened recently, whereby this is looking almost real. I want to begin by complimenting the Indore Management Association. Honestly, believe me, I'm not saying this to flatter you because I'm here, but you're doing an outstanding job. I'm not trying to seduce the non-members into becoming members, but I've been associated with the IMA for a long time now, maybe 10 years or thereabouts or more. And what you're doing is really stupendous. There is a certain energy, there's a certain vibrance, and I haven't understood what is the secret sauce. I'm trying to find out whether your wives feed you some special sauce in the night or in the morning for breakfast, but there's something very special happening here. And considering especially that India is growing rapidly and transforming enormously, not necessarily in the tier 1 towns. I'm not, by referring to Indore as a tier 2 town, I hope you will not misunderstand me, compared to Bombay, Delhi and so on. But the tier 2 and the tier 3 towns are expanding very rapidly. And long before this phenomenon began, long before, the IMA 50 years ago took root and is paying a yeoman service in a city like Indore. It's unbelievable that you have 60 engineering colleges and 40 management colleges in this city. I wonder what else you have, because that seems like hell of a lot. I think the future of this country depends on entrepreneurship and managerial development in a more spread out way than South Bombay. And I must applaud the effort that is being made here and the success that you're reaching. And I could only wish for you on your 50th anniversary that God give you the energy and the commitment that you've had for 50 years for the next 50. Because with a bit of luck, in the next 50 years, this won't be a 2 million population town. It may be a 5 million population town, even though some of us won't be around. The topic that you have assigned me is a very interesting and intriguing one. And I interpreted it in a certain way because I get the opportunity to talk to people as I travel, as indeed I've done a few minutes ago, 1 hour ago with some of your own colleagues here. And I want to express some views and thoughts on this point of direction and distance. And hope that a vibrant organization like IMA will be able to make this a central focus of debate. It's not that you're going to find an answer tomorrow or produce a report. Perhaps collaborate with the Indian Institute of Management in Indore, because you have an academic resource also available here, and produce something that is going to be path-breaking or potentially path-breaking for Indian business and management. That is my hope, and this may be a very, very minor contribution in that direction. You've talked about leadership challenge, but you followed it up with a subscript, direction and distance, which is not common. Very often people say leadership challenges for the future, technology challenges. And this point about direction and distance are very evocative, because to me, there's a tension between the two. If you're a golfer, you know that when you're standing on the tee box and you pick up your woods to drive the ball, some people like to whack it really hard, take the big driver, and they want distance. They care where the ball lands, but somehow they want to get that feeling of distance. There are others who are more careful and who take a 7-wood and swing their own swing so that they know where it lands, somewhere on the fairway. You find the same in cricket. There are some pace bowlers who bowl enormously fast, but it goes all over. There are 2 wides in an over, 3 wides, especially in a crucial over. And others who are more measured and accurate in the way they bowl. The same thing happens in the field of business and entrepreneurship. When the Saudi Prince Al Walid complains that the Forbes magazine, all of you must have read this last week, has underestimated his wealth by 10 billion. You say, is it direction or distance that's causing him to make that comment? I would be perfectly happy to have his wealth and not be counted with my picture there at all. But I don't have his wealth. But he's complaining that they've quoted him at 19 or 20 billion when his actual wealth is 30 billion. There must be a sense of power, ego, counting, and perhaps credit rating in making that statement. The idea of distance, how far, what do I accomplish, how big I become in my life, in my business, comes out of the left part of the brain. As you know, we have 2 parts to our brain, though we don't always use either of them, but nonetheless we do have 2 parts of our brain. And the left part of your brain is hardwired into rational, analytical thinking. It corresponds to what in our Puranas we call a guna, called the rajas. Your rajasic thinking comes out of your left brain. And that drives you to achieve things, do things, be better than somebody else, be number 1, number 2, the richest, etc., etc. Direction is a softer attribute. And all the softer things in your actions and lives come out of your right part of your brain. And the emotion and the acceptance of things which are not concrete but yet are important comes out of the right part of your brain. And that corresponds to a guna called sattvic. So there's sattvic, rajas, and of course there is tamas, which we'll all have right after this function is over. We'll go home and sleep. We are going through some very unusual times, and you don't need me to tell you that because all of you are experiencing it. And in view of the fact there are several ladies here, I will try not to get jargonistic about the business and the economic parts of it, because you're also facing the same thing. You're all driving a boat which is bobbing up and down in an ocean whose currents, frankly, nobody's got a handle on. Nobody runs it. All over the world, and we all travel. I have my share of travel. Nations, societies, companies, individuals are all feeling challenged by the extreme volatility of what they're experiencing, especially in the last 5 or 7 years. And as it looks very clear, it's not going to change in a hurry. So we are all getting our minds wired into accepting a new normal, which is the volatility that we are having. There is no point trying to predict, because every prediction seems to be wrong. It depends on just when you happen to look at that prediction. But part of this uncertainty comes due to this tension. This tension between the hard and the soft, the left and the right brain. You look at the things that you're facing. Corruption, living beyond your means, fractured politics. This makes many of us as citizens, especially if you've just watched Arnab Goswami on Times Now, feel that the situation is quite hopeless. But frankly, you travel anywhere in the world, whether you're in the United States, don't go to Europe at all, if you can help it. Go to Africa, go to Southeast Asia, you'll find exactly the same subject. If you just took out the names and replaced them. In Brazil, Dilma Rousseff has become president. We are talking of one minister or two ministers who have been charged with corruption and embarrassing our government. She's had to part with 7 ministers. And that was the last count. It might have become 8 or 9 by now. So this is a global issue that's happening everywhere. And I have a word to say about this, but I shan't deflect from the theme of what I want to get to. So having said that it's happening everywhere, it doesn't mean that you can be complacent and say, well, that's the way it is everywhere. You'll have to figure out how you are going to save your boat. The fact that other people's boat might sink or get water running into it is not going to be of any consequence. You have to save your boat, and that's what we have to be concerned with. And I've come to the view that the hard parts of what you need to do, you'll figure out. Hard parts, the rational, analytical parts. How will you cope with technology? How will you cope with economic efficiency? How will you cope with new markets? How will you cope with banking, treasury, foreign exchange? You will find solutions. Some academics will make models, you will attend courses, smart young people will come, and you'll be able to cope with them. The part that worries me, which is what I want to focus my discussion this evening, is on the soft part. The soft part usually escapes us because our brain is wired to thinking of the hard parts, the left brain side. And the softer parts of the right brain sort of take a back seat. Somehow it looks fuzzy and they don't receive the attention. And what I want to do today, if there's only one thing I want to do, is to focus on the soft part, on the assumption that the hard part will get sorted out by our wit, our knowledge, our wisdom. So what does the soft part mean? I think I need to explain that. Now the idea of something being soft power, was a sociologist and economist called Joseph Nye. Joseph Samuel Nye, N-Y-E was the name of the person. And about 25 years ago, he wrote a paper in the autumn of 1990, I think, in which he explained his concept of soft power. And it is exactly this set of things which is not to do with war, with fighting with each other, with arguing rationally, but soft things that help influence nations or societies to influence each other. Since my talk is not on Joseph Nye's soft power, I will leave that brief description and get on to what it is that I want to say. But for me, the exemplar of soft power is India. There are very few nations, there are some I'm sure, but I'm not an expert on this subject, which display the kind of soft power that this nation has displayed. And I'm making a reference to this not because I want to praise India to Indians, that's quite a pointless exercise, but you have a hidden Brahmastra. And I just want you to dock this in your mind, and I'll come back to this when I finish. Don't underestimate the power of your Brahmastra, because the definition of a Brahmastra is its power is known only when it's used, but you use it very, very carefully. This is something that our ancestors, our civilization has given us, and we have it. And I'll come back to that at the end. You know, long before Joseph Nye wrote his paper, when I was a young student in IIT, I remember the year 1966. I was in my final year of college, about to graduate. And I found 3 things that happened that year which caught my juvenile fancy. And I didn't know how to interpret it till I read about Joseph Nye many years later. But all the 3 were very significant for a young man at that time. The first was, Ravi Shankar became international. He, as you know, befriended the Beatles, or the Beatles befriended him. And then the story of Ravi Shankar, the sitar, is well known. The second thing that happened was a strange man called B.K.S. Iyengar went to California and he started teaching yoga to people in Hollywood. And because of the Hollywood connection, that became very famous. And yoga is now an American word. Very soon they will package yoga and sell it back to India, the way yoga has gone. And the third thing that got my hair on end at that time as a young fellow was that Ruth Hunt, who was the Secretary General of the United Nations, invited that most mellifluous singer, M.S. Subbulakshmi, to sing Carnatic music in the United Nations. And she rendered in Shankarabharanam Raga a Kriti, which of course every Carnatic music lover revels in even today, Saroja Dalanetri, and brought into the portals of the United Nations and into the international arena a form of music which even in India was kept south of the Vindhyas. And Carnatic music became. There are many other forms of soft power I have observed over the next several years. And I'm mentioning the example not to say that it began in 1966, but that I became aware of it. And all of us need to become aware of our soft power. I'll give you one or two other examples of what I call soft power. The fact that we were denied, we meaning India was denied, the supercomputer technology, Cray, supercomputer technology back in the 80s, made India so angry that it was ordered that we will make our own supercomputer. And CDAC was formed and a Param supercomputer was launched. All of you, some of you might remember it, and those of you who don't should be very proud of that particular event. And it happened, Dr. Mashelkar often quotes this, that in the Washington Post the headline was "Angry India Does It Again." And it went on to say, you know, the Indians seem to get off their backside only when they get angry. They were so upset that they didn't get supercomputer technology that they did it on their own. And so that's another example of a soft power. And then I was very proud, though I wasn't responsible for it, when Tata's became the world's first privately funded supercomputer when we launched the ECA just 5-6 years ago and achieved 132 teraflops of speed with our supercomputer. These things are hair-raising. They make you proud. And we should never fail to take pride so long as it's not misplaced pride. And I'm mentioning it only for that reason. It's a form of soft power. That we've been doing it for centuries is a matter we should also recognize. There are only 6 religions in the world. 3 of them came from one particular, almost a particular town or a particular area. Israel is not a very large country. The 3 monotheistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The other 3 came from here. There are no other religions in the world. And this is another form of soft power. When Buddhism was exported, when Hinduism was exported, when dance forms, musical forms were exported. So it's a long tradition of soft power that this country, in fact, if anything, one could argue that this country has been very poor at hard power. We never invaded another country. We never had an arms race with anybody, despite what our neighbor may feel. And so I call India an exemplar of soft power. It is just that Joseph Nee gave it a name and a shape and a packaging, and I could put my thoughts into that little package. I've explained all this about soft power because although the problems that you're going to face may appear to have solutions in the hard and the soft domain, I want to focus this evening on the soft domain part. And that's why I've explained the word before I go into that. So I want to mention 5 challenges. You know, challenges you can mention heck of a lot. There are plenty of them. And I'm not suggesting my list is exhaustive or it's correct. But I offer it in the soft area because I think that's where India's great competitive advantage is going to come. If we get our minds around it and recognize it. Very often in our country, somebody from there has to tell you that this is fantastic, and then we say, wow, he's right. Who knew of the Dabbawalas of Bombay? Who knew about Arvind Eye Care? And there are many such examples where Harvard Business Review will come and write a case study, and then we will say, well, hey, not bad. We've been running Kumbh Mela for centuries. 100 million people come for the Kumbh Mela. The total population for the Hajj is only 3 million. It looks like a little small event. When Princess Diana died, it was only 1 million. So think of 100 in that context. 100 million people come. Overnight, almost, in a period of 1 week, you manage to put up a whole city which can accommodate 5 million people. You create a Bombay with sanitation, fresh water, everything. And you saw the reports that have been come out of this last Kumbh, having such outstanding results. But the same guys cannot design a decent city. So there's a paradox there. And we should be careful not to lose the baby with the bathwater, and therefore, at the risk of pretending to ignore our deficiencies, which I'm not intending to do, I'm focusing on the strengths. And let me now deal with the 5 challenges that I thought I should touch upon this evening. The first is the challenge of purpose. Why are you doing what you're doing? As a human being, as an individual, as a business, as a company, as a university, whatever it is that you're doing. Why are you at all doing it? Why do you run a foundry? Why do you do coal mining? Why do you make auto components? Can business really be a force for the good of society? And I'm not suggesting there's a yes-no answer to this. Very often there's a yes-but answer. But I would like to believe, based on my background and my experience and observation, that business is probably the biggest force for good in society. How many jobs are created by entrepreneurship and business? How many people's lives are touched by entrepreneurship and business? It's far in excess, I mean, including in this trade, manufacturing, information technology, all the things. It's probably the biggest in any country. In every country, that is the largest contributor. If only you got other things right, this would be recognized. Jamsetji Tata said that the purpose of a business is to be a part of the community, and we owe our responsibility to the community. And he said that in the 1880s, when nobody was even thinking about the subject. 75 years later, J.R.D. Tata said the same thing, that we earned our profit out of consumers and society. And so we have to return this money to this consumer and society. These were ideas which did not come out of Fabian socialism of England. It came out of some process which I haven't figured out, but were very lofty ideals, which have today become very fashionable in America. Conscious capitalism is the new buzzword. If you go to American universities, people are spending a lot of time researching and writing books on conscious capitalism, the roots of which we have seen in the last century, and certainly one has seen in Tata. I'm not saying Tata is the only people who did it, by the way, but I'm using the Tata example only because I cannot talk about examples I do not know. There has been merchant charity in our country for a very long time. I don't need somebody to come from America to tell Indian corporates they must contribute more to charity. I don't need the government of India to tell me I need 2% for CSR. And I think chambers of commerce, people in industry, must make it a point to recognize that that is their responsibility, irrespective of a modification of the Companies Act. And merchant charity in the Jain community, in the Chettiar community, in the Marwadi community, in the Bhatiyas of Gujarat, are legion. And I've just mentioned a few. There are a hell of a lot of them. The nature of that manifestation may change, and I think Jamsetji Tata, J.R.D. Tata were trying to express those lofty ideals in an Anglo-Saxon way. And I think we need to embrace more of that. But each of us needs to answer the question, what is the purpose for which I'm doing what I'm doing? I find it very, very energizing. And I want to tell you a story. In 1898, word spread around Chicago that there is some strange looking Swamiji wearing saffron robes, sitting and lecturing on the Vedanta and Hinduism. There was a French lady there, and she used to keep a diary. And she was a student or disciple of Swami Vivekananda, and she sent for John D. Rockefeller, who, as you know, by that time had made so much money on oil that he was floating on more dollars than oil. John D. Rockefeller was therefore also behaving that way. He was a big, arrogant guy, which all of us, anybody with that many dollars would become. Initially he refused to come to the Swamiji. And finally, on persuasion, he came to Swami Vivekananda. This is 1898. And this is recorded by this French lady, and I have taken a translation of that with all the references I've got. And Swamiji was sitting at a table, like Palthi Marke, in that inclined table. And he came and said, "So, I'm John." And they had a little conversation which he has described, but the essence of it is, he said, "You got lots of money compared to other Americans?" He said, "Yeah, how much more?" He said, "I don't even know. Maybe 1,000 times more, 100 times more." And Swamiji said, "Do you think you're 100 times smarter or 1,000 times smarter than the average American?" He said, "I must be." Hey, thanks a lot, appreciate it. "I must be 100 or 1,000 times smarter. Otherwise I wouldn't have that much money." Swamiji told him, "Is it possible that you're destined to merely be a conduit and that this money actually belongs back to somebody else?" And of course, she writes that John D. Rockefeller said, "Enough of this nonsense." He got up and he walked out. He said, "Some crazy guy." There was no Rockefeller Foundation at that time. He came back 6 months later or 4 months later, and he threw down a check. And he said, "Here's a check." And it was for some $5 million or thereabouts. "And I want to set up a foundation to do something." Which means that the thought then stayed in his head. And he said, "Are you happy?" And Swamiji said, "Nothing. What is your purpose? If you think 5 million is fine, that's fine. If you think it should be 50 million, that's fine. It's up to you." And it took 14 years after that, from 1899 till 1913, before John D. Rockefeller set up the Rockefeller Foundation. And of course bequeathed so much money there that this wonderful organization does good all over the world. And the whole idea of how his purpose got defined and served and influenced, I found to be very fascinating story. So the first challenge is the challenge of purpose. The second one is the challenge of inequality. Economists measure this inequality through something that they call the Gini coefficient. It's so boring to discuss what the Gini coefficient is. But it's a way of saying you've got a more unequal society than I. But at the end of the day, as grown-up people who are in society, we have to believe our eyes and our ears. And to me, that's what matters. The Gini coefficient moves ever so slowly, and in our lifetime it might move by 0.1, and we don't even know how to interpret it. When the 2010 survey of the world's wealthy people was completed by Capgemini and Merrill Lynch, it brought it to me in a way which is so stark. There are 7 billion people on this planet, 7 billion. 1 lakh of them, 100,000 of them, own 36% of the wealth. Now just imagine, I'll repeat this because you must get the zeros in place. 100,000 people all over the world own 36% of the world's wealth, and the other I don't even know what the decimals are, 6.99 billion people own the balance 64%. By the way, the statistics for India are not that very different. There are how many taxpayers whom Mr. Chidambaram writes love letters to? 75,000, 100,000. And they account for a very large part. So there is inequality everywhere around. And the question that we as responsible citizens have to think about is how much inequality can a society handle? Is the only way to deal with inequality to have a revolution, like the Russian Revolution, like the other revolutions that have happened in the world? Democracies are not supposed to have a resolution. And therefore, the idea that frugality is an important virtue that business people should practice lends itself automatically for some consideration. The man, we keep hearing about IKEA coming into India, the world famous furnishings company. Ingvar Kamprad, who founded IKEA, he runs his company reportedly with a sense of thrift, and his thrift goes so far that he flies economy class. He drives a Volvo which is 15 years old. And I'm not suggesting all of you do this because we have to sell our Jaguar cars to somebody. So please don't take it all too seriously. I'm trying to make a broader point about frugality and display of wealth. And these are only illustrations. There are people in India who do it. All of you know their names. But in some of our social circles, we tend to laugh at them as being conjus, that he flies economy. He drives an Indica instead of driving something else. I think, in my view, if I may submit with some humility, if you show meanness, selfishness, that is not an admirable quality. But when you show a cost consciousness and a prudence, which is what frugality means to me. Frugality doesn't mean conjuse. It doesn't mean you live everything on a shoestring. And if you regard frugality as cost consciousness and prudence, I think it's a virtue to be admired. And one of the things that's happened that before 1990, no businessman in this country would want to see his picture on the cover of a newspaper or a magazine as being a richest man. Today there are enough people wanting to do that and to be in the top. And it suggests that there is some animal spirit, to use the economist's expression, that has been unleashed. And all of us are a part of that. None of us is free from it. So the second one is the challenge of inequality, which we need to think about. The third one I want to talk about is the challenge of integrity. I'm not using the word integrity in the colloquial way if you stop a person on the road and say, what is integrity? They will say honesty, trustworthiness. I'm not using it in that way. I'm using a rather more nuanced definition. I see integrity like a tripod. It has 3 legs on which it is standing. And this is my definition. I don't even claim originality. I must be influenced by something I've read somewhere. But I'm not a professor on the subject. But I see it as a tripod with 3 legs. The first is there must be an element of trust, building trust. You must trust the person before the discussion of integrity begins. So trust is one of them. The second is confronting realities around you. You cannot close your eyes to realities around you. And the third is to act on that confrontation of realities. If all these 3 don't come together, there's no point having an honest man who doesn't act. And all of us understand you may admire somebody who's very honest, but if the action is not taken at the right time, then you feel a sense of loss of integrity. Integrity is a totality. It encompasses 3 things. And that's the point I want to make when I use the word integrity. Think of what happened in Duryodhana's court when Draupadi was being unrobed. It's a subject on which scholars have written reams of paper, and it's not a subject even I can begin to talk about. Bhishma kept quiet. Was Bhishma a bad man? No, he's not a bad man. Was he a dishonest man? Did he lack integrity? No. But at that crucial moment, Bhishma said nothing. There's a logic which he gave later as to why he did not restrain the Kauravas. But Draupadi was unrobed, and somebody else had to come and rescue that situation. There are many examples of these in our Puranas and our mythologies. There are many modern examples. I just need us to think about this item as something different from honesty. The fourth point, so I have talked about the challenge of purpose, the challenge of inequality, I've talked about the challenge of integrity, is the challenge of authenticity. I'm making a distinction between authenticity and integrity. To most of us, authenticity is saying what is in your mind. Be upfront, as we say. But that's not true. It's exactly the opposite. Don't say what's in your mind is authenticity. Try going home this evening and telling your wife what is exactly in your mind. The divorce rate in Indore will go up dramatically. Or, if I may be gender sensitive, let a wife come and tell her husband what she really thinks of him. So you don't go around telling people exactly what's on your mind. Authenticity is something to be managed. And it sounds a bit odd, because that's not the way we think of it. But public life, public discourse, social intercourse happens because people who can manage authenticity are abundant. not people who can just shoot their trap off. Otherwise, you might as well be the Home Minister of India if you just want to shoot your trap off. So, I was looking for some evidence for this because most of us are left brain and we want research evidence. Here's a report day before yesterday from Washington, so it's the latest Taja Khabar. You know, people do research on all sorts of things. Here's the research finding. According to this study published in Washington, the average American couple each partner lies to each other 3 times a week. Are they all unauthentic husbands? If I say, have I told the absolute truth of what's in my head every evening for the last so many years to my wife? No, I don't think I have, because she wouldn't be my wife anymore. And then I say, am I therefore an unauthentic husband? No, I'm not an unauthentic husband. So what is authenticity? And therefore this leaves a subject for us to discuss, because each one has to find his own space. But I argue that authenticity is something that society has to learn to deal with and manage. It's not what we think it is. And the last point I want to conclude with is the challenge of empathy. If I had to choose a CEO of a company, I would choose a person whose intelligence is not Phi Beta Kappa, he's not a Mensa member, but who's empathetic, rather than a guy who's about to get the Nobel Prize, but who doesn't have empathy. Empathy is the ability to not just put yourself in the other person's shoes, but to actually feel what the other person feels. That's very different. When the Nirbhaya case, as it's come to be called, happened in Delhi, you look for symbols of empathy. There were a lot of statements of sympathy, but the symbols of empathy were not that many. What if this was your daughter, if this was your sister, if this is somebody close to you? Would you react the same way? You wouldn't. So, this point about empathy affects our business life. And I don't want to get into the public space because that is not my strong point. But you look at your business. The state of relations between boss and subordinate in commercial establishments is absolutely abhorring. And we don't realize it. Or if we realize it, we don't have our minds around it. At least I did not have my mind around it until the last couple of years when I started to apply my mind to this subject. Again, we need evidence. Gopalkrishnan says, so what? So, I quote to you first. Ashridge Management College has published a study in 2011. I've referenced all these. It is done in the UK, so you could still argue it doesn't apply to India. But here is the study. What it says is that there's always been a gap of understanding between subordinate and boss. It's not new. Between son and father, between daughter and mother. But the gap is widening. And it's now reached such a wide dimension that people ought to take notice of it. I just don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I'll give you 1 or 2 numbers to just focus your mind. In the old days, when I was a young guy, people said, my boss is unhappy with the subordinate. Now the subordinates, 32% of the subordinates are saying they're unhappy with their boss. They're saying it openly. Because the gap has become so wide, they have to say it. They're given the reasons why they're unhappy, which is not enough independent responsibility, not an interesting and challenging job, not being paid enough. And what is the reaction of the boss? Oh, these little pups, they ought to know where they belong. When I was there, this is the way we did it. I've done it. Show me a man who's never done it. The thought has certainly passed my mind. I may or may not have expressed it. So there is one evidence from the Ashridge Business School. And I would very much like to suggest if the IMA can get the funding from other people than Tatas to do a piece of research with IIM Indore on what is the state, because you have a lot of students there. Use them. And this is not a very complicated piece of research to do. And if IMA publishes a study on its 50th anniversary, then what is the state of boss-subordinate relationships? It's one brick on the wall that you would have set. Study number 2, Towers Perrin. You all may or may. Towers Perrin is to HR what McKinsey is to strategy consulting. They publish a study which is 90,000 employees are polled in 18 countries. And what they're trying to find out is how many of them are really engaged with the company and how many are disengaged with the company. And you obviously expect, what is the manager's job? A manager's job is to manage people. Of course, he has to manage a factory, he has to manage a sales region, but he does it through people. So you would expect a manager to be skilled in hiring 100 people, and hopefully some will always be disengaged, maybe 10 or something, but at least 30, 40 would be highly engaged and some will be in between. That's what you would expect. I found the opposite. For every one engaged employee, there are 3 disengaged employees. And then you say to yourself, what the hell's wrong? What kind of a manager do you have there? His main job is to manage people, and he produces 3 disengaged employees for every 1 engaged employee. Would you give your legal case to a lawyer whose track record is that he loses 3 cases out of 4? Would you subject yourself to surgery if the doctor's track record was out of every 4 patients, 3 are killed at his hands? And yet, we give our young people to managers of whom 3 out of 4 are disengaged. It shows a huge problem in the matter of empathy and people management. And the last study was published in the Harvard Business Review in 2005. And it refers to the now much publicized emotional quotient, EQ. All of us know what EQ is. It's a bit of all this empathy and soft stuff. And they found something which I found quite stunning. And initially I was suspicious of the results, but when I thought about it, I said, well, maybe there is something to it, I should think about it. They found a way to measure the EQ, like there's a way to measure IQ. So you get a number. Just for argument's sake, it is 7 on a 10-point scale. They took all the people who join a company at the lowest levels, and they had, say, 7. As they grew in the company over the next 15 years, their EQ improved from 7 to 8. I'm taking dummy numbers, so it went like that. And those who got kicked further up, the EQ came down. So you had a barrel-shaped result. So the most successful people have an EQ which is equal to what it was when they were 22 years old. This is absolutely scary. If you put these 3 together, you say something is really wrong in the kingdom. And people like us can do something about it, because these people are all working in your company and mine. So I've covered these 5, the challenge of purpose, the challenge of inequality, the challenge of integrity, the challenge of authenticity, and the challenge of empathy. And I've warned you in advance, I shall be keeping myself to soft subjects, which I've done. I need to conclude, because I have not come here in a prescriptive mode that here are the 10 tips to fix the problem. This is not that kind of thing. But I think it deserves the attention of... I'd like to close by just talking a word about leadership, because I've spent all my time talking about direction and destination and said nothing about the leadership challenge. Leadership is a quality you notice, like beauty, when it is visible to you, when people are actually being led and they feel led. It becomes a negative energy, to be honest, because there can be leaders who have the cleverness to divide their opponents, but not the vigor to rule. That's also a form of leadership you have. And a lot of it has come now into the world, not just in India. You have the cleverness to divide your opponents, but not the vigor to rule yourself. The difference between those who have a cleverness to divide the opponents and not the vigor to rule, and those who lead positively, is that one has traction and one seems to be stuck in the same place. And there are syndromes of this you see in the European Union for sure, in India for sure, in many other countries. I can remember 2 instances in history, there must be many more, when the same situation arose. Louis XV in France before the revolution. It was exactly that. Nothing was moving. And then you had the French Revolution, of course, soon after. And we had it in our country. The last great leader who actually led with many pluses, some minuses, was Aurangzeb during the Mughal Empire. And as you all know from our history, after Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire started to crumble. But we forget, if you delve into the post-Aurangzeb era and the decline of the Mughal Empire, there was Muhammad Shah Rangila who ruled for 29 years, from 1721 to 1748. 1719 to 1748. And Muhammad Shah Rangila was damn good. And if you read Jadunath Sarkar's book on the decline of the Mughal Empire, he describes this in great detail. How he became so clever, he was very smart. He managed to keep everybody fighting with each other, but he never gave any positive. And if you really, historians mark the collapse of the Mughal Empire, not to Bahadur Shah Zafar, which happened 100 years later, but to the end of Muhammad Shah Rangila, because he carried this on too far. We have that syndrome, not just in our country, but in many other countries. And if business is a force for the good of society, people like us can consider what we can do in our own small spheres. We can't change the whole country, and that's not the solution. But I want to close by saying, whatever we do, we should never despair. It does get despondent from time to time. And if you stop reading the newspapers or listening to Arnab Goswami and Rajdeep Sardesai, your mood will immediately improve. Just try it for a week, believe me. And then start to think for yourself that despair never solved a problem in the world, ever. In fact, I went back to the Valmiki Ramayana, and if with your permission, I will just quote one which inspired me. There are probably many couplets one can quote. Hanuman had reached Lanka, and he was in despair. As you know, he went from palace to palace, he could not find Sita. He didn't have a clue where she was. And the thought that he would have to go back to Sri Ram in Dandakaranya and say, my mission has failed, was killing him. And then he got this idea. He says, Anirveda Shriyo Moolam, Anirvedaha Paramam Sukham. Anirvedo hi satatam sarvartheshu pravartaka. Since all of you understand Sanskrit, I don't need to translate it. Only those who never despair can show interest and enthusiasm in any work. Therefore, Hanuman said to himself, despair is my enemy. Let me get back to my task and see what is it that I can do which is different in order to solve this problem which looks unsolvable. And then, of course, he landed in Ashokvana, and the rest of the story we know. And we are in such a situation. I, as a citizen of this wonderful country, feel I'm exactly along with another 1.2 billion people in that situation. Despair is not going to solve our problem, it will precipitate it. And we have to constantly look for that needle in the haystack that will save us. Because we are privileged to be living at a time when for the first time in 5,000 years, this country has the chance to move out of abject poverty. Our ancestors waited 5,000 years, and the kind of abject poverty we've had in our country is shameful, to put it simply. All of us realize it. But if we get our act together, which is not in your hand and my hand alone, this country can remove poverty of the kind that we see, the pestilence. And when you're part of a great change, you don't realize it. In 1820, in Dickensian London, nobody thought that London could be an international financial center. It was a cesspool of squalor, ill health, disease, drainage. As late as 1880, for 50 pounds, you could ask a question in the English Parliament. So corruption and these kinds of things have happened everywhere. At 60 years after independence, the United States were killing each other. And Abraham Lincoln was trying to prevent them from killing each other. We are a country which has had democratic capitalism for the first time in our livelihood, in our history, in the last 20 years. We are an adolescent country. We may be a 5,000-year civilization. We are an adolescent democratic capitalist country. There is enormous hope in this country, provided you don't listen to Arnab Goswami and read the newspapers in the morning. And I would hope that IMA, in its 50th year, will dedicate itself to joining the many pilgrims who are needed to run this country, take it up. Despite all the problems, I see only positiveness for the future. I hope I have been able to share that with you. Thank you very much.
you, sir. Mr. Gopalakrishnan is a man of fables and metaphors. So he'll be talking to us in a more interactive tone and metaphors as we ask the questions. So that was quite intense, if you ask me. Just to bring down the intensity levels, we've got some questions lined up for you, which are more frivolous. So start with the beginning, sir, if we can have the question answer sessions, if I have your permission. Can we do that, sir? Okay. So starting with the first, sir. Who is your first wife? Tata's or your wife itself?
You don't call my wife itself.
Apologies, ma'am.
You know, my wife is my wife. Tata's not my wife. And you can say that in Tata's cannot be found.
So you have the recording. Guys, we need to edit it rightly then. Thank you, sir. The second question again is a little bit frivolous before we move on to the more interesting ones. Who is the more effective leader, Mrs. Gopalakrishnan at home or yourself at Tata? Ma'am, even you can answer this question later.
I think she is damn effective. Whether I am more effective than her, I should not judge.
I would have also said the same question, same answer. My wife is sitting just next to me. Thank you. Can we have some questions from the audiences, please? And if we can have the mics being circulated in the meanwhile. No, not really. I said for myself it was intense, but from the audience reaction, I'm saying they're mesmerized. So there's a lot of food for thought that you have left on us for the table, and probably we can discuss it over. So.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. I had just one question. You spoke about wonderfully well about the challenge of authenticity and the challenge of integrity, and also the interplay of us as business leaders. And when you see the public policy today, and you were speaking about Bhishma and Draupadi, I was reminded that that's very similar to what may be happening in our country today. And how do you read
I
that?
didn't say that, but go ahead.
Maybe let me say that then. we seem to be risking is the inequality is becoming more and more on the one side.
But we are not part of that.
We are part of
Nothing to do with
part of
that. You know, I found it tougher to be the chairman of a building society in Bombay than to work for Tata as a chairman or a director. You try becoming the president of your building society or your club. You know, it's terrible. So the politics is in us. It's not just the politician. All of us are there. And therefore, if each of us would apply medicine to himself, you try, I don't know, your professional societies, your chambers of commerce, before you know what's happening, divides, subdivides, now it's happening in NASCOM. You're from the IT industry, so you know what I'm talking about. So let's take our future in our own hands, because if you leave the key for your happiness in somebody else's hands, you'll never get the key back.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions? Can you have the mic just?
To go and hide and stop reading newspaper for a week and all this. What makes you so cynical about the media?
No. Thank you for asking the question.
I mean, it is coming from a business person like you, who is coming from Tata Group, and you are talking as if, it hurts me that, you are suggesting that what newspapers are talking and what the electronic media is speaking is all is despair and nothing, no hope are being created in this country.
So can I clarify now?
Please.
The first is, if you're hurt, I apologize. I was being humorous about it, and perhaps my humor was misplaced, so I apologize.
We can still tone down the questions though, and we can move to the other questions.
What you are trying to say, Mr. You are saying something.
No, sir, I beg your pardon if I said anything wrong.
No,
However,
you should clarified.
sorry?
I am very serious about my question.
No, it is taken in the serious context, sir. However, these things can also be taken offline. So if you really want to take these questions, we can take them offline. Thank you. If you can ask any more questions.
I'll be very happy to engage with you separately
Yes.
if you wish.
We will do that.
Yeah, first of all, sir, I really appreciate the way you presented, and I really enjoyed in the international conclave also attended before last. Just had a small question. When you said that the great visionary leaders use more of the left cerebral cortex, the left brain part. So my question was that what efforts we should make to use more of our left brain?
I think I said great visionaries use their left brain. I merely stated that we do have a left brain and a right brain. But much of our cultural and academic training is to be reliant on your left brain. But you get very different outcomes if you're able to energize your right brain. That's all I stated. So it has nothing to do with the visionaries having one or the other. We all use both brains. So please don't go away with the impression that we are either this or that. There's a whole new thinking going on about what they call design thinking. How can you balance these two better? But that's a subject by itself, it's not my subject.
Sir, next question.
Sir, you spoke about an opportunity that for the first time in the history of our country, we are possibly within the reach of getting rid of the poverty. That means we should be able to say that 1.2 billion people of this country would be able to get rid of poverty. That means they would be, at a consumption level, would be somewhat like Americans or say modern developed country citizen. Now, India is almost 4 times the size of US. So if so many consumers are to be created, then from where are we going to find the resources, natural resources? Would it not put the burden on the entire ecosystem and the production and things like that? Is it the right way that we should be aiming to get rid of poverty and call ourselves rich?
May I clarify? In responding to the brief and make it chatty and not too formal, I have used the privilege of language when I say there's a chance to remove poverty. I'm making a sweeping statement. I don't have econometric models to show you as to how that will be done. So don't take all these things that literally, as I requested my friend from the media. What I meant to say was not that we'll become like America, but that this abject poverty that we have, maybe it will be removed. There are people, economists, who've done studies on this, by the way, but that doesn't mean you have a per capita consumption like America. So that's not what it means. Now, it's a rhetorical question to say, should we remove poverty? That is the question you asked. For me, that is not a subject on which we can have a discussion. But should we consume like America? That's a very fair question, but that's not what I stated.
So we'll take the last question, sir.
Yes, sir. This is Mahesh. Outside the house of Tata, who would come closest to being your role model when it comes to corporate leadership and why?
I have to say Unilever, but that's the other place I've worked in.
So we can squeeze in one more question since we got to answer quite quick. And Mr. Vallabh, if you can have that to you.
Sir, as a young student of the future management, I have a dilemma. You spoke about the boss-subordinate relationship. In the evolution of the management till now, in the past decades, the boss-subordinate relationship is based on the wisdom and the experience of the age. Quite so, everywhere. But in the coming young generation management of the future, as we see the empowerment, etc., whatever is going to the younger and younger age. So the age is not counting all that much, experience is not counting all that much because innovations are coming in. How do you see the emerging such relationship of the boss subordinate in the time to come, which is going to be based on innovation and young and youth? Thank you.
I think if I might respond in a slightly simplistic way, in our mind, just like authenticity means just say what is in your head. Number of years experience is equal to wisdom. That's the way at least I tend to think of it. You know? A person with grey hair, you assume to be wise. A person with many years experience, you assume to know a lot. It is that equation that is being challenged by a very bright youth of the society and by the newly available tools of technology. And therefore it is possible for a person at the age of 40, 45 to be the President of the United States and a successful one by whatever measures you might choose, or the Prime Minister of the UK, which probably wasn't, apart from William Pitt back in the 1700s, you don't have that kind of phenomenon. Today it's not that uncommon to see it. And I think that's the change that is happening. It's not a disregard for age or experience, but the relationship between age and experience is now being fractured.
Thank you very much, sir. We proceed to the next thing on the menu. We can have Mr. Shamit Dave, the President IMA, to conduct the ceremony of honoring the senior directors at IMA.
Thank you, Amit. Ladies and gentlemen, we've also assembled here today to acknowledge the contribution of our heroes, our former directors who have guided, advised and supported IMA for the past couple of decades. The success of IMA so far is due to their vision, hard work, determination. It is also due to them that we are celebrating this day today. May I call upon them all to accept the token of our gratitude from Sri Gopalkrishnan. So may I? I request Sri Ravi Mohanji to please accept our gratitude from Sri Gopalkrishnan. Sri V.K. Goyalji. Sri Jagdish Verma ji. Dr. N.P. Jain. Shri A.H. Maheshwari ji. I believe Dr. Ramesh Panati and Shri A.H. Maheshwari ji are not available today due to their commitments. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Please. Sir, we have honored you for our gratitude, but we request you all to please supporting us and keep giving your guidance as you've been doing for the past so many decades. I, on behalf of Executive Council, also appreciate the guidance and support received from our new chairman, Shri Shiv Singh Mehta, the board of directors, Mr. Mahesh Sharma, Mr. Sunil Chodia, Mr. E.V.K. Agnihotri, Mr. Manoj Fadnis, Mr. Sumer Singh, Mr. Vinay Chajlani, Mr. Sudhir Mishra, Mr. G.M. Maheshwari, and Mr. S.K. Mishra. Ladies and gentlemen, the contribution of all these stalwarts of industry cannot be put on words. Their vision, their support has driven IMA to these heights. Can I request Amit to please post the vote of thanks?
So before we proceed for the vote of thanks, if I can call upon Mrs. Suchitra Sajid Danani, the owner of Sayaji Group, to felicitate Mrs. Geeta Gopalakrishnan with a IMA hamper, please. Ma'am, if you can please come off the stage. We can do it there. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for honoring us for the evening, ma'am. Sir, I feel extremely honored to take this opportunity on behalf of IMA and the entire management fraternity to thank you for accepting our invitation and sharing such rich and golden thoughts with us. It was truly mesmerizing string of thoughts. As Gopal sir says in his book titled, "When the penny drops, learning what is not taught." And I like to read a line from it, sir. Learning is ubiquitous, providing you are ready for it. If you have the humility which makes you self-aware and open to learning, the penny can drop anywhere, anytime. Sir, I remember once you said, I had the opportunity of earlier being moderating one session with sir as the SYMP. And I remember him said that time, I had to go through the video archives although, as a management professional, I have learned my most important lesson when I was expecting them the least. The lessons have come from all kinds of people and all kinds of situations. So it is important to have the humility to learn. Without humility, one is not aware of one's mistake. You can learn only if you have the humility to learn and are self-aware. So these are the words that come from a person who spent about 50 years in the industry. You've touched many hearts, you've touched many students, you've touched us on many levels. His association with IMA goes for more than 12 years, if I'm correct. And I'm sure that we would be seeking his guidance in the times to come. I'm thankful to all, and I'm grateful to the entire management fraternity for their participation. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll have drinks and dinner then. Thank you. Thank you, sir.